In a realistic fantasy world, gnomes would likely be small humanoid creatures, averaging around 2 to 4 feet in height, and their body would be proportionate to their size. But they should have either slightly larger heads in comparisons to humans and their body ratio, or have a higher neuron density inside of the head, if they have the same intelligence like a human would have. Of course, they could also be slightly dumber, smarter, or just different on a very fundamental cognitive level than the average human. But if they are meant to be just humanoids, more or less equal to humans, they should also have more or less the same intelligence as them. But their biology should affect them in a different area, namely the entire rest of their body. First and foremost, if they are smaller, they need more fur than us humans, since they would have a greater body surface area relative to its mass, so they would otherwise lose more heat more quickly. This of course could also be an advantage in hot and arid environments, where sweating in combination with dry air and their smaller body mass would let them shed heat very effectively. So perhaps there are some sort of volcanic gnomes that are just living out there near volcanoes, able to dive into hot water for a few minutes and venture into areas with a temperature twice as high as that of a normal human body and be able to survive in them for a certain amount of time, if they carry enough water with them to sweat. Gnomes would also be individually weaker, at least in terms of physical strength, than humans, and therefore they would be an easier meal for many predators. And because of this, they might be night active in order to simply avoid them. And therefore they would have keen eyesight, particularly in low light conditions like when the moon is out, reflecting more their natural habits. And as for habitats, aside from any place they can hide in during the day and venture out at night, it could include dense forests or subterranean environments, and their ears might also be slightly pointed and larger than human ears, and way better in their function, aiding in acute hearing, which is beneficial for detecting predators or communicating over longer distance in their often dark environments. And their skin tones could range from earthy hues to green to blend in with their surroundings, offering them more natural camouflage, and their hair color might vary widely. They could have be indeed vibrant red and orange hair during their mating season, so like 11 months out of the year, because the hair color is made with copper and other substances in order to attract mates, to just a deep brown and black for the remainder of the time. As for their lifespan, they could follow the general trend of having much shorter lives than us humans, since they are smaller, just like a mouse or a cat has a lower amount of years to live than, for example, an elephant. Or they could be perhaps like birds and live way too long for their normal body size, reaching perhaps multiple centuries in age. And of course this could just be because they are an offshoot of the dwarves, just smaller and more adapt to the forest biome. Which brings us to their settlement and their society. They could, for example, live in tree trunks, hollowed out trees, in natural occurring caves or artificially created tunnels, like the dwarves, and live essentially like mole people, plugging the harvest from below the ground, instead of harvesting them from above the ground. And if they have longer lives, their reproductive rate should also be lower than that of a normal human, but still faster compared to their lifespan, because of the greater numbers of predators that would normally prey on them. But with advancements in civilization, with better weapons, with bows, slings, and most important of all, magic, they might be able to turn their reproductive rate and their lifetime into a severe advantage. They could drive out the predators and build settlements akin to the hobbits from Lord of the Rings, in the hills, rather than above them or below them, for added protection and for style. But since they are individually weaker and smaller than a human, since they live for centuries, and since they grow far older than a human, they will likely always value magic over bodily feats and strength, meaning that gnomes will form a society more defined by magic than us humans could. And they would be likely much closer to elves than dwarves in this regard. But otherwise, their society could be very similar to humans, and just as complex and different and intricate than them, with the expectation that domesticated animals and magic will play a far greater role. So perhaps this lack of natural physical force will also lead to more refined mechanical constructs, perhaps advances in wind and water mills, better irrigation, and perhaps very early forms of industry and fabrics, which of course might lead them to expand and become predators instead of prey. And I think this would be a very interesting faction in any fantasy world because A, hobbits and similar creatures are often overlooked, and not only because of their height, but because most writers don't really know what to do with them, and because they would blend in several aspects of many different races. They are biologically closer to the dwarves, they share territories with both elves and dwarves and humans, they are magical, but not by nature like the elves are, but by necessity, and at the same time, they would be very much invested in animal husbandry and mechanization of their economy, since their bodies are so much smaller and weaker than that of a normal human, a dwarf, and even an elf. And that's basically it for today, and now it's your turn. What do you think about gnomes and how they would work in a realistic fantasy setting? Let me know it down in the comment section. And while you type, I say thank you very much for watching and have a nice day.